Hey food lovers, ever sit around and daydream about those old school casseroles your mom or grandma used to make? You know the ones, they'd hit the table and suddenly everyone's day was better. But nowadays, some of those comforting, cheesy, creamy, and delicious casseroles have disappeared. So let's take a journey down memory lane as we talk about 20 forgotten casseroles that deserve a comeback. Grab your favorite snack and let's dive in. Green Bean Casserole. First on the list is Green Bean Casserole. Ah, the Green Bean Casserole. It's one of those dishes that screams home. You probably remember it making an appearance at family gatherings, Thanksgiving, or Sunday dinners. It's simple, just green beans, mushroom soup, and those crunchy fried onions on top. Not exactly fine dining, but there's something magical about it. Maybe it's the nostalgia, or maybe it's just the fact that it's so easy to make. Back in the 80s and 90s, this casserole was a go-to side dish for American families, especially for those looking for something simple yet filling. But as more people started focusing on healthier, more vibrant flavors, casseroles like this one fell out of favor. These days, it's rare to see anyone whipping up a green bean casserole unless it's during the holidays. But for those who miss that cozy, creamy, crunchy goodness, it'll always hold a special place in our hearts. Beef and Noodles Casserole. This one was the ultimate comfort food for many, a simple yet satisfying dish that combined ground beef, egg noodles, and tomato sauce. It was kind of like spaghetti's heartier baked cousin. For years, this dish warmed American homes, especially on cold nights or after a long day. It was quick, filling, and perfect for feeding a crowd. But as more adventurous food trends took over, beef and noodles casserole started to fade. People either returned to traditional spaghetti or experimented with more exotic pasta dishes. Still, for those who grew up with it, this casserole was like a warm hug on a plate. While it might not be trendy anymore, there's something to be said about a simple dish that just works. Anyone else craving a throwback meal right now? Maybe it's time to revisit this classic and embrace the beauty of easy, satisfying dinners that take us back to simpler times. Trust me, one bite of this cozy casserole and you'll remember why it was such a favorite. Corn pudding. Down in the South, corn pudding was a beloved dish that brought families and communities together. It wasn't fancy, but that's what made it so special. Just a few simple ingredients like corn, a thickening agent, usually cornstarch or flour, and a generous amount of butter to give it that creamy, pudding-like consistency. It was especially popular during tough times when families needed a cheap filling meal, and since corn was abundant, this dish made the most of what people had on hand. While technically more of a side dish than a full-on casserole, it earns its place on this list for its long-standing role in Southern kitchens. Corn pudding is comfort food at its finest, served alongside heartier main dishes and always guaranteed to disappear quickly from the table. Unfortunately, as more elaborate casseroles and side dishes took center stage, this humble classic began to slip into the background. These days, you might only see it on the table during Thanksgiving or special occasions, if at all. But don't let its simplicity fool you. Corn pudding is a reminder that sometimes the most satisfying dishes don't need to be complicated. It's creamy, slightly sweet, and deeply nostalgic, proving that simple can often be more delicious than we remember. Chicken Divan. A casserole that was once the epitome of fine dining in the early 20th century. Imagine chicken, broccoli, and cheese bathed in a rich, creamy sauce. Sounds divine, right? And it was. This dish was created at the Divan Parisien restaurant in New York City. Back then, it was a luxurious treat, something you'd have to pay a pretty penny for. But as with all fancy foods, people started recreating it at home. Chicken Divan became a household staple, and everyone tried their hand at it. But finding that perfect restaurant quality version today? Nearly impossible. It's sad because this dish wasn't just a meal. It was a full experience, rich, indulgent, and comforting all at once. Now it's something you rarely see on restaurant menus or dinner tables. Time to bring it back? We think so. Chicken Pot Pie Casserole. We all know and love chicken pot pie, right? Now imagine it mashed together with a casserole topped with fluffy biscuits. Yes, please. This was one of those dishes that gave you everything. Crunchy, gooey, savory, and comforting, all in one bite. It was a showstopper at holiday dinners and even made its way into office potlucks. But as time went on, people shifted towards lighter meals or meals with more exotic flavors, and chicken pot pie casserole faded from the spotlight, which is a shame because nothing beats that blend of creamy chicken, veggies, and buttery biscuits. If you've ever tasted one, you know exactly what we're talking about. It's a mystery why people stopped making this more often, but hey, there's no better time to bring it back, right? Mexican Egg Casserole. The Mexican Egg Casserole is a vibrant dish that brings together the bold flavors of Latin American cuisine. Stuffed with eggs, cheese, and popular spices, this casserole is often a crowd pleaser at brunches and family gatherings. Its hearty ingredients make it perfect for any meal, whether breakfast, lunch, or dinner. However, as culinary trends shifted toward lighter fare, the Mexican Egg Casserole became less prevalent. Many restaurants no longer offer it, leaving fans longing for its return. Its rich, savory flavors deserve a place in our modern kitchens once again. Let's celebrate the Mexican Egg Casserole and bring back its delightful flavors. This dish offers a delicious way to enjoy the comfort of a casserole, while indulging in the bold and exciting tastes of Mexican cuisine. Hamburger Helper Casserole. If you were a kid in the 70s or 80s, you probably grew up eating Hamburger Helper Casserole. This was a dish that blurred the lines between a simple weeknight meal and something truly indulgent. Pasta, hamburger patties, and a cheesy sauce all baked into a bubbling, gooey casserole. It was the kind of dish that made you go back for seconds, maybe even thirds. But as health concerns about saturated fats and calories grew, so did the wariness around this calorie-packed dish. Doctors started advising people to cut back on dishes like this, and gradually Hamburger Helper Casserole became a relic of the past. Still, there's no denying it was a fan favorite in its heyday. If you're feeling nostalgic, why not whip one up and take a trip down memory lane? Scalloped Potatoes. Scalloped potatoes, thinly sliced spuds baked with cream or milk until they're soft and buttery. What's not to love? This dish wasn't your average casserole, it was pure potato perfection. People started adding cheese, fried onions, and sometimes even bacon to give it extra flair. Back in the day, this was the kind of dish you'd pull out for movie marathons or cozy nights at home. It wasn't the most filling casserole out there, but it had that melt-in-your-mouth factor that made it irresistible. Sadly, as more complex and creative casseroles emerged, scalloped potatoes got pushed aside. It's not that people stopped loving them, they just got distracted by other, flashier dishes. But those who've tasted a well-made scalloped potato casserole know it's pure gold. Bring it back for your next movie night and thank us later. King Ranch Chicken Casserole. King Ranch Chicken Casserole is the type of dish that transports you straight to the heart of Texas with just one bite. This layered Tex-Mex casserole is all about the bold flavors. Chicken, tortillas, a creamy sauce, Rotel tomatoes, and lots of melted cheese. It's hearty, spicy, and oh so satisfying. The dish gets its name from the famous King Ranch, one of the largest ranches in Texas, although there's no actual connection between the ranch and the casserole. But who cares, right? The flavors speak for themselves. During the 60s and 70s, this casserole was a potluck superstar, showing up at church gatherings, family reunions, and school functions. It was one of those meals that fed a crowd and kept everyone happy. Unfortunately, as more gourmet Tex-Mex options became popular, King Ranch Chicken Casserole began to lose its shine. But honestly, this dish deserves a spot back at the table for anyone who loves a good, spicy, cheesy casserole. Corned Beef Casserole. Corned beef is synonymous with St. Patrick's Day, but there was a time when corned beef casserole was a regular dish beyond the holiday. Back in the day, people made this casserole using leftover corned beef from big dinners, tossing it with potatoes, cheese, onions, and sometimes even cabbage. It was a frugal yet hearty dish that kept families full and satisfied. While corned beef itself hasn't gone anywhere, the casserole version is harder to find nowadays. With the rise of more specialized and less meat-heavy casseroles, this old-fashioned dish became a thing of the past. But for those who love a good, salty, savory bite of corned beef mixed with rich potatoes, corned beef casserole might just be worth reviving. Tuna Noodle Casserole. Oh, tuna noodle casserole, where would we be without you? This dish might just be the original pantry meal before pantry meals became a thing. With a can of tuna, some noodles, a bit of cream of mushroom soup, and a sprinkle of crunchy breadcrumbs, you had dinner sorted. It wasn't fancy, but it sure did the job. If you grew up in the 60s, 70s, or even the 80s, odds are this casserole was a regular at the dinner table. It was budget-friendly, easy to throw together, and somehow always tasted better the next day. However, as people started exploring more diverse cuisines and quicker meals, tuna noodle casserole became one of those dishes that got pushed to the back of the recipe box. But let's be honest, there's something undeniably comforting about that salty tuna, creamy noodles, and crispy topping. This dish is a reminder that a little bit of creativity and a few simple ingredients can go a long way. So maybe it's time we pull that recipe back out and give it the appreciation it deserves. Macaroni and cheese casserole. We all know mac and cheese, but back in the day, macaroni and cheese casserole was an entirely different beast. This wasn't your standard stovetop boxed variety. No, this was mac and cheese elevated, layered in a baking dish with plenty of cheese butter and often topped with breadcrumbs or even bacon. You'd bake it until the cheese was bubbling and the top had a golden, crunchy layer. This casserole was a staple in the 50s and 60s and made frequent appearances at family dinners and church potlucks. But as instant versions of mac and cheese became more common, the casserole form started to disappear. However, if you're looking to impress at your next family gathering or just treat yourself to a bit of cheesy heaven, the baked version of mac and cheese is one dish that deserves a permanent place in the rotation. Baked Ziti. Baked Ziti is another casserole that once dominated potluck tables and family dinners alike. This dish, filled with layers of pasta, marinara sauce, ricotta, mozzarella, and ground meat, was essentially a lasagna shortcut. It was easier to make but had all the flavors of a hearty Italian meal. Baked Ziti was the go-to dish for busy families who still wanted to serve something homemade. But as people started focusing on lighter Italian fare or quicker pasta options, baked Ziti started to fall out of favor. Today, it's still made in some households, but it's far less common than it used to be. For anyone who misses those cheesy, saucy layers, baked ziti is a dish that deserves a major comeback. Baked spaghetti. Casserole is a dish that once gained a cult following but struggled to maintain its popularity over time. This casserole combines spaghetti, marinara sauce, and cheese into a baked masterpiece that's both comforting and filling. It was a go-to for busy weeknights, allowing families to enjoy a hearty meal without spending hours in the kitchen. Despite its simplicity and convenience, baked spaghetti casserole slowly faded from our tables. As people became more adventurous in their culinary choices, they began exploring new and exciting flavors. Leaving this classic behind, it became overshadowed by more modern interpretations of pasta dishes that often featured fresh ingredients and complex flavor profiles. However, let's not underestimate the charm of baked spaghetti casserole. It offers a nostalgic taste of home that many of us long for. The delightful blend of flavors combined with its ease of preparation makes it a dish that deserves to be brought back into the spotlight. Let's rekindle our love for this classic and enjoy the warmth and comfort it provides during family dinners. Sweet potato casserole. If you're from the South, then you probably know all about sweet potato casserole. While it's mainly associated with Thanksgiving, there was a time when this dish made appearances throughout the year. Creamy mashed sweet potatoes baked with butter and brown sugar, and often topped with a layer of marshmallows or pecans. It was a dessert disguised as a side dish. But as tastes have shifted toward less sugary side dishes and more complex flavor profiles, sweet potato casserole has largely been relegated to holiday tables. Still, for many people, this dish is a must-have at any festive gathering, and for good reason. It's a nostalgic favorite that hits all the right notes, sweet, rich, and satisfying. Breakfast casserole. Breakfast casseroles were once a weekend staple, especially for families that wanted to make something big and filling without spending hours in the kitchen. Imagine layers of sausage, eggs, cheese, and sometimes hash browns, all baked together in one dish. It was perfect for feeding a crowd, and everyone loved it. These casseroles often showed up at holiday brunches or when house guests were around, as they could be prepared the night before and popped in the oven in the morning. But in recent years, the rise of grab-and-go breakfast options and quicker meals have made breakfast casseroles less common. That's a shame because nothing beats the smell of a savory casserole baking in the morning, especially when you know it's packed with all your breakfast favorites in one bite. Broccoli cheese casserole. Broccoli cheese casserole was a sneaky way to get kids to eat their vegetables back in the day. The recipe typically included broccoli, a creamy cheese sauce, and some kind of crunchy topping, crushed crackers or fried onions. This dish was particularly popular in the 80s and 90s and showed up at everything from family dinners to potlucks. While broccoli itself is still very much in the spotlight, this cheesy version has largely been replaced by fresher, more health-conscious preparations. But let's be real, there's something special about that creamy, cheesy goodness that made even picky eaters fall in love with broccoli. For all the veggie lovers out there, this dish could be the nostalgic comfort food you didn't know you needed. Shepherd's pie. Shepherd's pie, while not originally American, became a favorite in households looking for a hearty meal. Made with ground meat, vegetables, and mashed potatoes, this dish was the ultimate comfort food, especially on cold nights. Traditionally, lamb was used, but many American versions swapped it for ground beef. This casserole had a rich, savory flavor that made it perfect for feeding a family on a budget. But as modern recipes started favoring quicker, lighter meals, shepherd's pie became less common. Today you might still find it on some menus or at certain gatherings, but it's definitely not as popular as it once was. However, for those who crave a stick-to-your-ribs kind of meal, shepherd's pie is a dish worth bringing back. Enchilada Casserole. Enchilada Casserole was a favorite for families looking for a Tex-Mex twist on the classic casserole. Layers of tortillas, seasoned beef or chicken, beans, cheese, and enchilada sauce made this dish both hearty and packed with flavor. It was perfect for feeding a crowd and was often a go-to dish for busy weeknights. But as more authentic Mexican food became widely available and people sought out quicker options, enchilada casserole started to fade from dinner tables. These days, you're more likely to find individual enchiladas at restaurants than the casserole version. Still, for those who remember the dish, it's a satisfying cheesy meal that deserves another shot in the spotlight. Chicken and rice casserole. Few things say comfort food quite like chicken and rice casserole. This dish, which combined rice, chicken, and a creamy sauce, was a staple in Southern homes, especially in the 60s and 70s. It was simple, filling, and often made with leftover chicken, making it an affordable meal that could feed a large family. The beauty of this casserole was in its simplicity. You didn't need a lot of fancy ingredients to make something delicious. But as the years went on, this humble dish was overtaken by more elaborate and health-conscious recipes. Today, chicken and rice casserole is something of a forgotten classic, but for those who grew up eating it, it's a dish that brings back warm memories of family dinners in simpler times. Cabbage roll casserole. Finally, we can't forget about cabbage roll casserole, a deconstructed version of traditional stuffed cabbage rolls. This casserole was a hit with families who wanted all the flavor but none of the rolling. Ground meat, rice, tomatoes, and cabbage were layered and baked to create a dish that was both savory and comforting. It was especially popular in areas with a large Eastern European population, where cabbage rolls were a beloved tradition. However, as more global cuisines gained popularity and people moved towards quicker meals, cabbage roll casserole became less common. But for anyone who loves the flavors of old world comfort food, this dish is worth dusting off and bringing back to the table. And there you have it, 20 casseroles that time forgot, but that definitely deserve a comeback. These dishes remind us of a time when comfort food was king and a single casserole could bring the whole family together. If any of these made your mouth water, maybe it's time to bring them back into your kitchen. Which casserole was your favorite growing up? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more food nostalgia and recipes. See you next time.